All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? I am John Kurtz. I appreciate all of you guys who have been hanging out watching the YouTube channel. Please come in, give me some questions, hit me up in the chat. Let's get to your questions as soon as we can. But I do have some things to talk about. All right, and to get prepared for this, basically my prep for this live show today was I'm sitting in my car. I'm on the way home. I'm grabbing some dinner after doing the radio show today. And somebody told me about the fact that there was a caller on the Paul Feinbaum show who was a former coach who I guess had coached with Bill Snyder at one point in time. So if you guys are unfamiliar, I live in Manhattan, Kansas. I've covered K-State in the Big 12 for the last 10 years. And so I was like, okay, well, that's very interesting. I'm very interested in finding out what a caller on the Paul Feinbaum show had to say about Bill Snyder. Well, come to find out, Feinbaum said that Snyder was not a top 40 coach in the last 50 years because ESPN just came out with this list of the top coaches of the last 50 years. And look, I think there's an argument that you could say Bill Snyder did the best coaching job of the last 50 years. So it was obviously ridiculous. Anyway, it was fascinating. This guy did call in. He had coached all over the place in every conference. He had coached with Snyder and gave this great story. He really educated Paul Feinbaum on just how awful K-State was before Snyder took over. But to get through that, I had to listen to like 3 hours of the Feinbaum show, and I was fast forwarding and not really sticking around listening to every single call, right? But my God, like it is just nauseating, man. Like this is a part of the impetus for me really pushing this channel right now in conference realignment. Just because there is just no voice out there for the Big 12 right now. There is nobody that's publicly advocating for the league and the remaining 8 schools here. And the look, I mean, as you would expect, like just the treatment from Feinbaum and the treatment on that show, just not even second-class citizens, man, like third-class citizens. It's like a third world country or something. And it's disgusting, dude. Like there's just college football is great because of the regional rivalries, and I can understand and appreciate that. And I know that nobody in Paul Feinbaum's listening area is ever going to really care that much about the Big 12, but it's bad. It's brutal out there, and the Big 12 and these 8 schools deserve some more damn respect, okay? So that's a big aim of what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to be crazy speculative. I'm not trying to be too clickbaity, even though, look, I understand sometimes the headlines have to be a little bit that way just to get your attention, but like, man, I really want to do a service here and allow Big 12 fans a place to vent, a place to have their voice heard, a place to give that opinion. Because, to Feinbaum, it's like there's the thing that was killing me the most was that, look, they're very offended that anybody would suggest that Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, would have done anything wrong or predatory here. They kept using the word predatory. They were very upset. And I think that actually came from Kirk Schultz, who's the president of Washington State, and it used to be the president at Kansas State. So I am familiar with Kirk Schultz. And boy, they just hate that. And like, well, what's Sankey supposed to do if he gets a call from Texas and Oklahoma? It's like, look, man, like there's no doubt the SEC has been very predatory with the help of ESPN. And, to Feinbaum, it was a frivolous thing that Bob Bowlesby did, bringing up the cease and desist to ESPN and all of those allegations, and kept saying like, well, where's the proof of this? He comes out with this and there's no proof. Well, apparently Paul Feinbaum's not reading anything that Bowlesby has said since then, which is like, hey, we're going to have a public ceasefire here and take care of this behind the scenes. That's not done. Like, look, I've got a video. I keep saying this. I've got a video coming. I'll get it to you about ESPN and the role that they played in all of this conference realignment. I mean, John Skipper, the former president of ESPN, was on the Dan Le Batard show right as all this hit, Texas and Oklahoma, and he was asked, did you cause conference realignment? Did you start conference realignment? And he said, I plead the fifth. So, I mean, like, they know, and it's been this joint thing with ESPN and the ACC or the SEC propping each other up forever, and now they're just cannibalizing the sport. And I don't know. It's just that this was not planned. I was not planning on going down this road, but in listening to that, spending the last hour listening to that, it just fired me up once again in all of this, and just made me even more just back to the original feelings. The first week or two of realignment, it was just like a burning fire deep inside me of just anger at everything that's happening and destroying not just Kansas State football, which I grew up knowing and loving, But Big 12 football and the Big 8, man, like that's what I grew up with. And I love Oklahoma State. I make fun of Iowa State. We have a nice little rivalry going, but like, look, I've got nothing against the clones, man. They in a way, they're definitely the brethren that you grew up with in the Big 8 conference, man. It's so disheartening. And I had kind of moved away from the anger because you're just getting closer to the season and not thinking about it in those terms quite as much. And I'm thinking about it like, hey, how do I get this covered, from a job standpoint? But that got me right back to being angry. That got me right back to being very angry about all this and just how everybody treats this. I mean, look, I'm listening to callers. I'm listening to a caller who's a South Florida fan on the Feinbaum Show call in and say, like, hey, the Big 12 needs to just disband. Why does everybody think that AAC teams would go join the Big 12? It needs to be the AAC soaking everybody up. And, John Oresco, the commissioner of the AAC, has been really quiet, Paul. What does that tell you? I've got sources. Things are happening behind the scenes. Dude, get the bleep out of here. Like, I can't take this idea that the Big 12 is even a second-class citizen to the AAC right now and that it's getting dunked on by Paul Feinbaum on his show in that regard. And I mean, that's the way, look, Feinbaum was like right in line with, he loved this guy, loved this South Florida caller. The Big 12 is like a sixth-class citizen in the college football world right now to Feinbaum and everybody in SEC country. So, guys, it's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating. I feel for you if you're a Big 12 fan. Like, that's what I want to be for you guys, man. I want this to be a sounding board for Big 12 fans. It's not always going to be conference realignment. Once we get into the actual season, like, we're going to talk football. It's going to be football talk. I try to throw you a little bit of a bone in there with the Texas segment earlier this week about how I think they are by far the most overrated team in the Big 12 right now. Just the mere fact that they are ranked after what their reputation has been over the last decade and what they threw out there last year, and losing Sam Ehlinger, the one guy that was keeping that thing from being a 4-win enterprise. I mean, Texas was a Sam Ehlinger away from being Nebraska and Scott Frost over the last 3 years. So to me, it's ridiculous that they would be in the preseason top 25. So yes, David, shout out to David. This is going to be the first comment that I recognize here. David, Feinbaum is an SEC dorkwad. You are correct. You are absolutely correct. It's not even like, look, as a radio guy too, that's the thing with Feinbaum and his show. Like, as a radio guy, I shouldn't do this because I don't. Look, go get your money. Clearly, Feinbaum's put in a lot of legwork to build the show up to what it is right now. But it's just calls. It's just calls and interviews. There's no prep that goes into it. I mean, I'm listening to him talking about injuries that Georgia has to start the show, and he doesn't know first names. He's just dropping a couple of last names in there, and then it's just call. I mean, dude, I wish that could be my job. If you guys make this thing big enough and I can just go on every single day and just take calls from all of you guys from around the Big 12 and just have you do 90% of the work, that'd be fantastic. That would be fantastic. I would love to do that. It would be really fun. Let's try and make this as much of that as we really can. All right, I'm going to start going through some of the comments here. Thank you, everybody who's here, by the way. Like, sincerely, the way that this channel has grown over the last month with conference realignment, it's blown me away. It's been awesome. Everything I've ever wanted to be is just somebody that can be an advocate and a voice for the Big 12 and just talk Big 12 football. So I appreciate it a ton. Sincerely, I really do. Everybody who subscribes, even if you comment, you disagreed with me, and we've gone back and forth. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, I can be a snarky a-hole. Like, I can admit that. If you have put up with that, I appreciate you putting up with that, because sometimes that's just what happens. So John Kelly, I appreciate you stopping by. Looks like you are a West Virginia fan. Let me tell you this, John. All right. I do have, if you guys have any questions about this, like, I have a decade of experience covering the Big 12. So I've traveled with K-State every year to every game since 2011. So I've been everywhere in the league. And my favorite trip is to Morgantown, West Virginia, because it is so unique from everything else in the league. And it makes me mad. I feel like Morgantown gets a bad rep. It is so unique. I mean, it's like winding hills and just the topography of like where you're at. It's cool, man. I really enjoy it. And so that was one of the pleasant surprises to me when West Virginia joined the league. I've been there, like 4 times now, I think, for games. And, it's helped that I've had some good experiences there with how K-State has played. The 2012 game, one of my favorite K-State games of all time, and one of my favorite games I've covered. But a part of that was because the crowd, I mean, it was an electric crowd at Milan Puskar. It just, only lasted for about 5 minutes before West Virginia was down by 3 touchdowns and Geno Smith was slapping tarp on the sideline. I'm sorry, John, I shouldn't go down that road. But I appreciate it. Methinks, Boomer. All right, if you're an Oklahoma fan and you're here, I appreciate you, man. Look, Oklahoma plays a very interesting role in all of this because it is true. Texas fans, I hear the Texas fans that are upset by the fact that Oklahoma is not taking near as much flack as they are, not taking as many bullets as they are. Totally get that. But there is some fairness to that because Texas has been the problem since day one in this conference, right? So I'll stick up for you, Oklahoma fans, in that. You should be able to skirt a little bit on this deal because Texas has been the problem since day one. They got under Nebraska's skin. It's always been the arrogance and daddy's money and we are better than you all. You're second-class citizens. And then they tear down they blow everybody out of the conference. 4 teams leave, and then they look around and say, well, this is boring. We don't like this conference anymore. So saw someone use the analogy like coming into a hotel room, just trashing the hotel room, right, doing the rock star thing, and then being like, well, this sucks. I don't want to stay here. Let's get a different hotel. I mean, that's Texas. Oklahoma, you win the league every year. You're the only thing. You're subsidizing the league from a competitive standpoint. So, all right, look, if you want to go to the SEC, like, what can I really say? So anyway, there's a quick little synopsis of Oklahoma. Methinks, since you're an Oklahoma fan, let me just get this off my chest. I will say, still to this day, there's nobody I hate more than Josh Heupel, who absolutely ruined my dreams in the year 2000 by beating K-State not once but twice. Once with game day there when K-State was number 2 in the country, and then again in Kansas City in the Big 12 championship game, in a game that I attended and was as cold as I've ever been in my life. And it wound up with me watching Josh Heupel stuff oranges in his face at the end of the game because they were going to the Orange Bowl. Randy, appreciate you being here in the chat. What do you think of the Big 12 going after Houston or BYU? So 2 interesting cases here. BYU, I think, is incredibly intriguing. Now, I'm going to try and be careful, and I don't want to go down any roads of like discussing the actual merits of this, but what I know is fact is that 5 years ago, the Big 12 didn't have a ton of interest there because of the fact that there were a lot of concerns from LGBTQ communities about BYU. It doesn't seem like there is that same level of concern, at least right now. Now, maybe if a story got out there that the Big 12 were looking at BYU, that would change, but it seems like the temperature has been turned down on that somewhat, plus desperate times call for desperate measures. And BYU, to me, is undoubtedly like the biggest brand that's out there. If you want a brand and a fairly national fan base, again, because of the relationship that they have with the church, I mean, that there is a lot of value in that. There's a lot of value in that. There is also there are a lot of tricky things that come with that, like not being able to play on Sundays and how does that work with non-revenue sports, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the bottom line from me is it's an intriguing option with everything on the field, like competitively and brand and the value you would get from that. If there were not the extra concerns there, I think it's a slam dunk that you would have to go after them if they want to be a part of that. The question to me is, how much does that other stuff come into play, and how desperate do you wind up getting, quote unquote desperate, do you wind up getting? Houston, I love the idea of Houston being in the league because to me, it feels like a sleeping giant kind of a school. I love having a bigger Texas presence in the league, a massive media market. I think schools like Houston and UCF could really make the next, not this up, the next TV contract you're going to get, you're going to take a hit, right? But the one after that on down the line, 7-8 years from now, whatever, that's where I think a school like Houston could provide a lot of value. If they take off, if they come in your league, get some extra resources, a little bit of extra shine from the Big 12, and then take off, now all of a sudden you may have a better product on your hands to sell to TV partners on down the road. So like, I think both of those would be on my short list. I mean, to me, it's like Houston, BYU, UCF, for sure those 3, probably Cincinnati. That's a 4th. But the issue with Houston is going to be what do the Texas schools think of it? Like, what are you going to be able to get that past Texas Tech? You're going to be able to get that past TCU and Baylor. They don't want that competition. They don't want to help aid another Texas school and have to recruit against another Texas school that's now in the same league. Like that's the tricky part with Houston. And, a lot of what I've heard throughout this process is just that would be a big sticking point with even Oklahoma State, who's pretty close to Texas. And if you go look at their recruiting classes, like they are in Texas all the time. So that's another competitor potentially for Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. I don't know that they would be really thrilled with that. Let's see. DHE33, ACC should just take West Virginia, Oklahoma State. Geography works. Yeah, look, the problem with that is, and there was a really good interview. I'll just plug this on the page. You can find it on the YouTube page from this week. Very good stuff with Mike Casaza, who covers West Virginia for their 24/7 site. But, he really spoke to, like, there's a sense of pessimism almost around West Virginia and the ACC because, like, they've wanted to go before, didn't get the invite, it didn't work out. And what is the case right now that they would add legitimate monetary value to the league? The ACC is like the one league I can never remember what their specific payout is, but I think it's in the upper 30s, somewhere around what the Big 12 was paying out, like 37 mil per team. I know the Big 10 is like 55. The SEC is talking about being up over 60 with Texas and Oklahoma. Either way, I don't know that you can make a case that West Virginia adds $35 million worth of value to the league, right? And so then all of a sudden you're splitting the pie different ways. So it's like, yes, the geography definitely makes sense. West Virginia has, look, like right now, you talk about a solid football program. I think Neil Brown is a really good coach, a guy who was a finalist for the job at K-State. And to be honest, at the time, I wanted K-State to hire before Chris Kleiman. So, like, I think the world of him. I think they're recruiting their butts off right now. I think the football program's in a good spot. And basketball, my boy Hugs, he's rock solid too. They have a really good athletic profile going on right now. So there are some things that would make sense, but unfortunately, like, none of this, as we've all found out good and well here in Big 12 country, like, none of this is a meritocracy. It's just all about the dollar signs and what your brand value is to, everybody across the country and what you could bring to a streaming package. And I just don't think it's there for West Virginia or Oklahoma State. Although the thing that Oklahoma State has working for it is that all these TV numbers that have come out from The Athletic would show you that Oklahoma State draws better than anybody else of the remaining 8. So Oklahoma State does have that in their back pocket. And obviously, Gundy's been the model of consistency. 8 plus, or it's 8 of the last 10 years, they've won 8+ games. So, clearly what they have going with football, and even like Mike Boynton in basketball right now, they just have the number 1 pick there. So Oklahoma State, they have some things working for them. But again, I have not seen the evidence that they would legitimately add you enough value to justify taking them in the league right now. And I haven't seen that for anybody in the Big 12. And that's kind of the problem that everybody is facing. Eric asking about the Pac-12, Big 10, ACC alliance. If they do align, is there a scenario where the Big 12 AAC truly become the second tier with no chance of the playoffs? Reckham Tech. All right, shout out, Eric. I'm trying to think my Lubbock story here before I get to this. So trying to address all you guys. The thing that I always remember about trips to Lubbock is not actually Lubbock itself, although I've had a very good time there. And shout out to my guy, Ryan Hyatt, who does an awesome job covering Texas Tech and is just one of the most entertaining guys that I know. Texas Tech, I always remember on the way back, our rule of thumb, because, we drive. Like, it's brutal. We're driving everywhere except West Virginia in the Big 12. And when we would come back from Lubbock, which is like a 12-hour drive to Manhattan, 11, 12, if K-State won the game the night before, we would stop, at the Big Texan in Amarillo on the way back and have like a breakfast brunch there. And that, fortunately, that's happened a lot of times. I believe the only time that it did not happen in the, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, been there 5 times. I think K-State's 4-1. One time it did not happen. It was our Lord and Savior Patrick Mahomes that was playing quarterback for Texas Tech. So I can excuse that being a Chiefs fan. I certainly can. If they align, does the Big 12 truly become the second tier with no chance of the playoffs? I think the Big 12 truly becomes the second tier. I don't think it means there's no chance of the playoff. Now, that's assuming that it does expand. I think the landscape right now, what you're seeing with the alliance and the SEC kind of going up against everybody else. I saw it compared this week to like the AFC and the NFC, basically. Like the SEC would be the AFC. The other 3 leagues would be the NFC in college football. The way it's all going, like especially with the relationship with ESPN right now, I don't think you're going to see playoff expansion as quickly as we thought over a month ago before all this realignment crop back up. So it's probably going to stay at 4 for the next 3 years before the ESPN contract is up. Assuming that it expands to 12 and goes the way that it's been reported to go, you would have the 6 highest conference champions actually into the playoff. So even if the Big 12 is Big 12, AAC, whatever this mashup hypothetical conference you want to call it would be, you'd still be in position to make the playoff. Because if you're the 5th best league, even if you want to say, I don't know who else would slip in there. Sixth best league. You would be one of the 6 best conference champions. So you'd still have a pretty clear path to the playoff. And like, if we're looking for silver linings here, that is one of them. That if you are a team like K-State, if you're a team like Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, the path to the playoff actually is conceivably easier if this happens this way. And you're not a part of the Pac-12, you're just a part of this mashup between Big 12 and AAC teams, because all you have to do is win that league. You don't have to go through Oklahoma anymore. It's basically just all about, like, think about winning the conference right now without Oklahoma. How much easier does that become? Much, much easier. So there's actually, I think, a better chance so you're a Texas Tech fan. Like, I think there's a better chance of Texas Tech making the playoff if they're in this Big 12 AAC conglomerate league. The problem is going to be like, well, what happens when you get there? And if it's tougher to recruit because you're not in one of the actual have leagues, are you going to have the talent to actually compete when you get there? Are you going to have as much fan interest throughout the season? You're obviously going to be way behind on money. So like when you get a coach that you love, say Matt Wells blows up and Matt Wells takes Tech to the playoff. Well, are you going to be able to pay him well enough if all of a sudden you're making $20 million, $25 million, $30 million less per year as an athletic department? Are you going to be able to pay a competitive salary relative to what somebody in the SEC or the ACC, et cetera, could pay him? That becomes one of the real problems here when we're talking about sustaining success. But yeah, if you want to boil it down to just playoff chances, definitely a case to be made that there's a better shot of these teams making the playoffs in that sort of scenario. Dan, appreciate you being here. Dan Sal. Were a lot of people naive to think the end of the BCS and the start of the college football playoff would have ended the need for realignment? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you can even trace that back to the commissioner. I mean, Bob Bowlesby was clearly pretty naive about what was happening here. And I'm not a Bowlesby hater, really. And a lot of you may disagree with that. But I think a lot of this was just inevitable. I mean, what were you going to do to keep this from happening? Texas and Oklahoma were able to keep this a secret from everybody for, Max Olson was telling me, over 6 months. He believes it was actually longer than 6 months that this had been going on between Texas and Oklahoma, and he's as well-sourced as anybody in the conference. So they kept it under wraps that long with a bunch of really, really dogged reporters in Austin and a lot of loose lips around there in Austin, like big, rich donors that like to be involved and like to talk. And that didn't get out. They kept it from everybody. I don't think there's a case to be made that like Greg Sankey, if he were the commissioner of the Big 12, would have sniffed that out. And even if you do, like, what do you do? I mean, how can you stop that? You're not going to solve the problems that Texas and Oklahoma actually have. So I don't think you would have kept them in the league anyway. So I'm not a huge Bowlesby hater, but he definitely did get caught in sort of a naive position. I was in Arlington. I was at Cowboys Stadium for Big 12 Media Days 6 days before the Oklahoma-Texas story broke, and I heard Bob Bowlesby sit at the podium and talk about conference realignment and say it wasn't something that kept him up at night. And to be honest, I was in the same boat of being naive, because I remember hearing it and just, it was like background noise. I was kind of sitting there working on something else while I'm listening to it, and I didn't stop. I didn't pay extra attention to it at all. I was just kind of like, oh, okay. So I didn't think it was any real threat either. And that's how crazy all of this has been over the last month. But yes, I think we all looked at it when the playoff expanded, if you're a Big 12 fan, and said, all right, well, this is great because now Oklahoma, like, they're never going to have to worry about making the playoff. All they have to do is not even win the league. I mean, they could be like Oklahoma from last year and stumble around at the beginning of the season and struggle and still turn back around and make the playoffs. So, like, why would they ever need to leave? Yes, I think there was definitely an air of naivete from everybody involved there. John Kelly, evening, everyone. Yes, good evening to everybody that's in the chat. I'm trying to work through these guys. I'm going to try and get to as many as I can. I think there is some way. I'm just going to put this out there. I kind of hate doing this. There is some button down there where I think you can like pay to get a comment highlighted. This show your support for John Kurtz thing. Look, I'm not trying to rip you guys a bunch of money or whatever, but I suppose if you did that and your comment got highlighted, maybe a better chance that I do get to it by the end of this thing. Brad, hey, John, I'm not a Big 12 fan, but you have a great show. Keep up the good work. Man, I really appreciate that. I'll just say this. I've dealt with on a small scale. I've been hosting a radio show for 7 years in Manhattan now. I've done some fill-in work in Kansas City. I So I've experienced some of, like you're going to have an opinion. Some people are going to hate you, and that's just the way it is. That's the way the job is. But then, all of a sudden you're getting more YouTube views and expanding to a wider audience. And it's like, okay, man, like some of the comments, it is wild. And I'll admit, I'm not always the best at like handling that. So long story short, I very much appreciate comments like that. I really do. Typically, you only hear from people when they disagree with you or they don't like what you're doing and they want to tell you suck, right? Like how often do you go out of your way to tell somebody, hey, man, I just genuinely really like what you do? It doesn't happen as much. So I appreciate that comment a lot. Melinda Mugrage. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I assume that's supposed to be K-State's an underdog. I think K-State this year, and for my K-State folks in the chat here, I've been saying all along, I think K-State's like a 7-5, 8-4 kind of team this year. I was just actually at practice today. They had 30 minutes of open practice to all of us in the media. A lot of optimism for the offense. Last year's, I legitimately think K-State had a chance to get to the Big 12 championship game last year if Skylar Thompson stays healthy. He was playing the best football of his career when he got knocked out against Texas Tech when Rico Jeffers knocked him out for the rest of the year. And then they went to Will Howard, who was a true freshman in a COVID year where he didn't have spring ball. He didn't have much of an offseason at all because he couldn't be with the team actually practicing. So it was just an unfair situation. I think there's a lot of optimism with him back. They have Deuce Vaughn, who's one of the best players in the conference and the country. Frankly, I think he's just going to be a superstar. And then outside of that, like Malik Knowles, Daniel Imatorbhebhe, I believe Josh was his brother who just got drafted. He's there at tight end. He transferred in. He's been at USC and Illinois. Two great weapons if they can stay healthy. And then a very experienced offensive line. Defensive side of the ball, there's a lot of questions. And like linebacker, I was not particularly thrilled with what I've heard this week on what's going on at linebacker right now for K-State. So I think they have a lot of question marks there, and they have a really tough schedule to start the year, certainly. The first 6 games, I mean, there's 5 losable games there, and maybe you could even throw Southern Illinois is the other one that's in there, and they beat North Dakota State. If you're familiar with FCS football, you know the significance of that. They beat North Dakota State last year, so that's not even a total cupcake, and they're ranked in the top 10 in the FCS. So it's not an easy schedule. They have Stanford to open the year in Arlington. Then they've got Nevada. Nevada is a team that I think may be better, actually, than Stanford. And then their first 3 Big 12 games are at Oklahoma State and then Oklahoma and Iowa State back-to-back in Manhattan. So it's not easy at all. If they're not ready to go, the season could get derailed pretty quickly. But that's a quick synopsis there. Eric Wilson Feinbaum is basically an employee of Alabama. Yeah, man, or just like the whole South. God, you guys are joining in late. Pretty good Paul Feinbaum rant at the beginning of this live. John Kelly, let's go Big 12. We laid in a very credited story earlier. Big 12 can survive and have as much money like the old Power 6 revenue money from the Big East. I don't look. I think the financial answer is going to be bad in the short term, no matter how you spin it. Even if things miraculously turned around with the Pac-12 and the Big 12 somehow created some sort of alliance or merger with the Pac-12, which seems pretty darn unlikely right now. Even if that were to turn around, I don't know that the money there is going to be. I mean, you still are missing Oklahoma and Texas, and even just adding. I mean, do Oregon and USC produce that same kind of value if the two leagues link up? I just don't know that you're even going to be making the $37 million. I don't think you would be making the $37 million per year that you're getting in a payout right now. And then if it's not that, if it's just adding AAC teams, I mean, now you're talking about Bowlesby's already quoted that as losing 50% of the TV deal. Like that to me seems even fairly optimistic. So you'll be down money, but I think if you want a not terrible gloom and doom take on that, it's again, if you can add the right teams and UCF and Houston turn into, or you bring in Cincinnati, shoot, they're in the preseason top 10 right now. If you take teams like that and they continue to do what they're doing, all of a sudden you could be much more valuable the next time TV contracts come around. And we don't even know what the landscape is going to look like. Nobody 10 years ago probably would have foreseen like how much streaming would have taken over by now and how that's changed the dynamics of everything. And we're only moving closer and closer to that side of it. So like, does Amazon get involved? Does Netflix get involved? Like some other entity like that, something that we're not even aware of right now, and decide to throw some bigger money around. Maybe there's a case that, hey, down the line, you could get at least closer closer money-wise. But the other problem is, I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten just continue to go up, up, up themselves. They're going to be making more money too. So I don't know that you're ever going to get back on like a legitimately even playing field financially if you are a Big 8, Big 12 school. Now, as one of the listeners to my local radio show made the pitch to me, at least if I'm talking about it from a K-State standpoint, and I think a lot of schools in the league could relate to this, you've never really been even financially, even if the payouts from the league are the same, you've never been even financially with the rest of the league. K-State has always won games as an underdog competitively, resource-wise, whatever it is. They've never had the resources that some of these top-notch schools have had and still have found ways to win and have decent levels of success. So I think that would be, if I'm going to not be total gloom and doom about everything, that's what I would say. Dan Sal, I'm not a fan of a Big 12 school, but like the content, but love football. Thank you, Dan. Shout out to my man, Dan. Brian Adams, world's moving away from macro value. College football needs 5 big conferences, short-sighted to value super conferences. Yeah, well, I think, look, the case about it being short-sighted, Brian, is where does this go in the end? Like, what is the end game? If we're really letting ESPN control all of this, which right now is the case, and right now Paul Feinbaum can dance around on his radio show and talk about how much Bob Bowlesby sucks and, you know, how the Big 12 is a joke and the SEC is the greatest thing ever and Texas and Oklahoma coming is going to be great. But eventually, when people get tired of, you know, it's exciting. And even myself as just a college football fan, look, man, would it be exciting to like every week have matchups like Texas, LSU and Oklahoma, Alabama? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. But eventually you'll get tired of it. Eventually it won't be as special. And then it's like, all right, well, what's the next thing? And you're going to keep moving more and more towards that. And eventually you're going to wipe out so many fan bases that won't be interested and won't care as much anymore about the sport because it's become the top 20 brands, the only ones that really make a difference in terms of eyeballs on TV. And by the end of that, like you're just going to have this wasteland of former fan bases that used to care and used to be really passionate that won't care as much. And you've in essence ruined the sport and it turns into just a total minor league, you know, basically the XFL. I think like you could get to that point eventually if you extrapolate this out down the road where it's going. The NCAA clearly seems like it's on the way out. It got destroyed by the Supreme Court in that case recently. NIL's happening. They've already started this new committee on like how to form a new type of governance for what's going on. So like there's just so much happening. And I do think there is an element of this that is short-sighted. Like, yes, a lot more money in the short term. And ESPN is trying to fill up their pockets, and Oklahoma and Texas are trying to fill up their pockets, and the SEC is. But what's the end game here? You may cannibalize the whole thing, and eventually it'll run out. But no, the problem is, you know, Brian, you and I could scream that from the top of the mountains. I could get up on the top of this apartment building, this complex, which is pretty high, and I could yell it to anybody who I would try to get within earshot of it, but nobody's going to listen. So it's just going to have to happen. Eric Bliss. What is Bowlesby doing to be proactive? I mean, we don't have tangible proof of like what's going on. I will say it was pretty proactive to get the meeting with George Kliavkov from the Pac-12. By the way, shout out to him for tweeting at me the official pronunciation of his name because that does freak me out every time I see it. That was a proactive move, and I will give him credit for that in a 6-hour meeting. I mean, that's pretty good. But the problem is we found out later that Pac-12, ACC, and Big Ten alliance had been in the works for a couple of weeks, that they'd already been talking for weeks. So he had just kind of been outdone there. And so much of this is just like, it just moves so fast. And the rest of the college football world had clearly just decided like, hey, we're out on the Big 12 thing. So I don't know. The short answer is I don't know, Eric. And I will add to that. I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and tell you like, oh, I have the ultimate faith in Bob Bowlesby. I think Bowlesby has this thing in the palm of his hand. He's going to get it done, but I'm also not a giant hater. And I don't know that there's a lot that he could have really been doing this whole time. I don't know what the next proactive move is because I think you're in a tough spot, right? If you're saying like, what's proactive now? And I know a lot of people, I've seen him in the comments of the videos that I put up would say, well, right now, I mean, you have to just be as proactive as you can and go raid the AAC and get those teams. there is, I think, some value in that. But what about like waiting around to see what happens with this alliance with the other three conferences? Because the upside is just so much greater if you can link up with the Pac-12 somehow. A Pac-12 that still includes USC and Oregon. If you can do that, if that is ever a possibility still, the upside for your league and the finances of all the schools are so much higher. So it's hard for me to say, like, you just give up on that and right now immediately move toward adding UCF, Cincinnati, et cetera, et cetera. But I could be wrong. Maybe there is more happening there behind the scenes. I just know at least what I get kind of from the K-State side of things is always like just a lot of caution on like, be careful about what you're reading and be careful about the rumors, and basically saying that there's just so much of what, and I won't even say is reported, I will say so much of what is out there just on Twitter, like the rumor mongering that goes on during conference realignment, just to be careful with that because a lot of it is just not accurate. So that's really the insight that I can lend to you right there. I don't have ultimate trust in Bowlesby, but I also don't know that I would have ultimate trust in anybody right now based on what the product is that they have to try and sell. Brent McKay, it's not like Bowlesby and the schools can go public with this information yet. 100%. And that, like, getting back to the Feinbaum thing where he's railing on Bowlesby and saying, look, there's no proof of any of this stuff that he brought to the table. You know, how can you do this and throw out this stuff unsubstantiated? Like, I mean, you can't legally be doing it right now. Like, legally, the athletic directors were pretty quiet at first about all of this. Like, you know, K-State's athletic director, Gene Taylor, for instance, they did turn down a couple of interview requests right after it happened because they were getting word from the top, like, hey, we need to be quiet about this because of the legal ramifications of what's going on. And I think, look, Bowlesby realized it's a dangerous game to play if you want to keep going public with allegations against somebody there. So, hey, let's tuck it back away and let's do this behind closed doors where we need to. I don't think it's not done by any means or any stretch of the imagination that something happens there. Okay. But it's probably not going to happen for a while. Litigation takes forever and it's all going to happen behind the scenes. And like, the fact that Feinbaum can't comprehend that or understand that is kind of mind blowing to me. All right. It looks like I've got a chat here. This is from Wade. All right. Wade Griffin. Wade, first of all, man, I appreciate a ton you not only jumping in the chat here, but being the first to throw some money in the pot here to get in the chat and have your comment highlighted. You guys can all do that too. There's a button for it in the middle there, down behind the right below where you type in the chat. I'm not trying to milk you guys of money. I'm going to try my best to get to every comment the best that I can as well too, but very much appreciate you doing that, Wade. How many teams should the Big 12 add to remain somewhat viable? Texas Tech fan asking for K-State friend. Man, shout out to all you Red Raiders. I feel like I've been getting a lot of Red Raider love in here and on this channel. You guys have been awesome. And I certainly really appreciate Texas Tech. And like I said, I've enjoyed my time in Lubbock. And again, I always tell Ryan Hyatt this. Every single time I go on his radio show, I sincerely thank the people of Lubbock and Texas Tech for gifting Patrick Mahomes to this world. Because as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I'm looking up at a Patrick Mahomes poster right by where I'm at right now. He's the greatest. Okay, so how many teams should the Big 12 add? It's a tough question to answer. To me, just because I'm sorry, Wade. I'm trying to think, like, what do I do with this chat just to make sure that this works and make sure that it got seen that I answered this. I think to me, it would be 4 makes the most sense. Let me just stop stammering and say that. To me, 4 would make the most sense. Get back to 12. You're the Big 12 conference, right? It offers you a little bit more stability to have the 4 teams as opposed to just 2 and just being back at 10. And I know there's been a lot of talk about that. Like, should they have done that back in 2016 when they were looking at adding some teams and expansion? And would that have really helped them out here in this scenario? I think 4 makes the most sense, but I also don't know like what TV executives are saying behind the scenes about that. Is there more value in the stability of bringing that in? Is there more value in only bringing in 2 and still only cutting the pie 10 ways? At that point, I do think the money would be significantly reduced enough that you'd probably say, let's just add 4 for the stability's sake here and for potential sake and make a future play as opposed to worrying about splitting this money a couple of other ways. That would be my thought. I would think that you go get 4. And to me, I mean, again, my short list is like UCF and Houston for sure. Man, I love UCF and Houston. And then beyond that, like Cincinnati is very attractive right now, although I don't think West Virginia would be too thrilled about Cincinnati getting the boost and coming into the league. So maybe that becomes a problem. And then, man, if we're talking about just, again, if you take the other concerns out of it, like my answer would be BYU. But I don't know. I don't know if that's really actually going to happen. But that's my thought there. Memphis is one that gets thrown out a lot. And look, I'll be honest, and I don't mean to offend any Memphis fans that are in here if they are. I've been to Memphis twice for the Liberty Bowl that K-State's played in. And like one of the times it was just like dreary and raining the whole time we were there. I think of Memphis being cold. The Liberty Bowl is not the nicest facility in the world. And one of the times K-State got duped out of going to Orlando, where I really wanted to go for the Camping World Bowl or whatever it was called at that point. So I just don't have the greatest memories of Memphis. So I'm tainted. I will admit my bias there. I'm very tainted about Memphis because of that. So anyway, I hope that answers your question, Wade. And anyway, you guys can all continue to send in some questions here. I'm seeing this from J&J Outlaw Sports. Really appreciate you giving me this question. Is it possible that Nebraska boosters leaked the infractions to the NCAA to get rid of Frost? Great question, J&J Outlaw Sports. I love talking about this because as a K-State fan, it still burns deep inside of me a hatred for Nebraska because that's what I grew up on. I was born in 1989, the year Snyder got to K-State, and so you had all these great battles. Well, they weren't great for a while. K-State was getting drilled, even though they were a great team in the late 90s by Nebraska every year, and then they break through and finally beat them in 98. I still have all this vitriol for Nebraska, right? And they bailed on the league. So, yes, it is absolutely possible that Nebraska – I mean, look, all you have to do is look at recent history in college football to figure out the likelihood and the possibility that that's what happened. Because Kansas did this same thing. I mean, it hits really close to home because KU did the same thing with David Beatty, where it was like a special teams coach that was – doing something extra, or I'm sorry, an analyst that was doing something with special teams in practice. They tried to get out of Beatty's like $3 or $4 million buyout because of that. It went terribly. They had to go through all this litigation. A bunch of stuff got deposed and put out to the media that reflected very poorly on the athletic department. And they wound up paying more anyway. But that was the play. They were trying to get out of the buyout by saying, hey, you committed this NCAA violation by having an extra coach involved in practice. And that's something that I really believe happens a lot. I really do think that happens a lot. How many analysts are out there on all these different staffs out there in the country? And do we really think that none of them are doing anything at any practices whatsoever? Like, come on. I think that is happening a lot of places. And so it's as a coach, that's kind of a dangerous thing. Like that's a trump card that the university can hold in their back pocket. But the other thing is beyond just the obvious there, Nebraska has a new AD that did not hire Scott Frost, right? Trev Alberts did not hire Scott Frost. He knows the temperature of the room. They've won 4 games a year for the last 3 years. Nobody's happy. And he has a $20 million buyout. Like even Nebraska's got a lot of resources, a lot of money. $20 million is a heck of a buyout to be paying for a coach. So you add all that up, and to me, it's just extremely obvious that is, it's like laying the groundwork for that. It's kind of like a warning shot, I think, to Frost. Like, we've got this on you, so you better win and win quick, or like not only are you going to be out, but you're not going to have the cushy beach house in Malibu to go along with it with this $20 million buyout because we're ready to go to war on that front. So, look, no love lost for me to Nebraska, but I do understand the predicament that they're in, certainly with that and that crazy buyout. I did a whole radio show basically on that earlier today. I find it fascinating. I think Frost is the most disappointing college football hire I can remember. And I mean, seriously, like that was a slam dunk, no doubt, 13-0, all the national championship talk from UCF. He's the hottest thing going, and he's an alum that won a national title for you like 2 decades ago. That was as slam dunk hires get. And it's just been a disaster. So anyway, I hope that gives you what you wanted there, J&J Outlaw Sports on the Nebraska front. So Frankie Gale here. What about the ACC taking Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, and Houston? That is very interesting. I'm sorry. I'm still trying to figure out how to – Frankie, if I screw this up here by what I click, I really do apologize. I'm going to try and do this with Wade here too. I don't know. Put user in time. I don't know exactly what that means. I hope I'm doing this right. All right. The ACC. Oh, now it says message deleted. Man, I'm sorry, Frankie, if I messed that up, but I'm going to try and answer your question here. The ACC adding like Oklahoma State, West Virginia, TCU, a bunch of schools. The tough part with the ACC is that they have that crazy long TV contract that goes through like their grant of rights is locked up through like 2036. So I don't know what moves they really have. And again, I don't think that those schools add monetary value right now. And I understand why you would include Houston there because I think like I think that Houston certainly offers a lot of potential, like I mentioned with the Big 12 and why I would like them in the Big 12. ACC seems like a weird fit. I've seen them mentioned with the Pac-12, but I just like you can't make a case to me that Houston right now really adds that much value to a conference and that they would actually be able to produce. The ACC's payout is like close to 40. So if you're talking about, well, or it's in the 30s, but either way, I don't think you're making the case that like Houston's adding $30+ million worth of value. So even if there is some sensical logic to it, like bring them in, cultivate them, Power 5 resources, they'll get better. They'll make your league better. They're paying Dana Holgerson like $4 million a year right now to coach. So, I mean, they're putting up some legitimate money. Tom Herman obviously has been there recently. You know, any of those schools, I still just don't think that the dollars and cents actually add up, unfortunately, for those schools' sake. Ronnie, man, Ronnie Cunhas, appreciate that a ton. Tech fan, been enjoying your videos. Thank you. Not even a question there. Just saying he enjoys the videos. You're the best. Sincerely, this has been very, very heartening for me to see the kind words that you all have and just how many of you have been hanging out here for 45 minutes now listening to this. This is great, man. I love college football. I love Big 12 football. Just really passionate about it. I've not loved anything more in my life than all of this. So it's really cool to see the response. Sebastian Flowers here. Getting back to just the questions regularly in the order here. Again, if you do want to get it up to the top of the list, you can hit that little money sign down there at the bottom, like those guys beforehand did to get your question in before. And again, I really hope, man, I was trying to figure out if I need to like click anything to make that work earlier. So I hope I didn't screw that up. It said like I deleted your comment, a couple of you that asked. I hope that didn't. If I messed that up, that is my fault. Please do not take offense to that. This is my first time doing a live video in a very long time. I think I did a couple when it was just a K-State channel like a year and a half ago. So Sebastian Flowers, your prediction for the Cats. Yeah, talked a little bit about this earlier, Sebastian. So if I don't give you as full of a response as you want right now, you can go back to watch the video on replay and get a better gauge of that. But if you put a gun to my head, I'd say 7-5. I'm optimistic for 8-4. And I think the range is really 6-6 to 9-3. Too many questions on defense and a really tough start to the season with that schedule are the reason why I wouldn't be more bullish on them right now. They were drilled by COVID and the Skylar Thompson injury last year really affected them, but it's hard to get the taste out of your mouth of 45-0 at Iowa State and it was 69-35, 38, whatever the Texas game was, the last game of the year. Just, it's tough to get that taste out of your mouth and think that, I'm not real high on the linebackers and what they have right now and a lot of holes on defense. I can't go more than 7-5, 8-4 right now as much as I want to. J&J Outlaw Sports chiming in again here. just to hit me back on the Nebraska comment, which is awesome. I just did a podcast on the possibility of the Nebraska boosters leaking it on Frost. The Cornhuskers are losing their noodles on my channel. Well, listen, J&J, anytime that you can stir up Nebraska fans, I am 100% here for it. Because, and like, here's someone commented, so I put up another shameless plug for the channel, that 30 for 30. 30 for 30. It's a thing I've done on my radio show for a long time now. K-State fans that have listened to the radio show are aware of it. Just a parody. And I stole it from the Dan Le Batard show. The best ideas in radio are stolen. That was definitely stolen. Stole it from the Dan Le Batard show. They do their 30 for 30 parodies with Stu Gotts. And I did one for Nebraska after that happened. And someone came in and said, like, man, that's savage. Like, why are you kicking them while they're down? Like, pick on somebody bigger, basically. Like, pick on somebody that's not down and out right now. Here's the thing. Nebraska for years, for decades, kicked everybody while they were down. K-State, Iowa State, whoever was down at the bottom of the Big 12, they would win games 70-0. No apologies. There were no scholarship limits back then, so they would just hoard second and third tier talent that would be going to schools like that and just keep them on the back end of their roster so that nobody else could have them, but they wouldn't play anyway. They did that for years. So anything that comes back around to Nebraska right now, no apologies from this guy about making fun of them, because they got to enjoy that for far, far too long. So anyway, J&J, I appreciate the Nebraska fodder there. Very much so. Okay, back to just a regular list of questions here. John, just someone national did some number crunching and figured out AAC revenue isn't close. Yeah, so the last I saw on AAC revenue was that, like, I know that their payout was under $10 million. And I'm trying to remember, I did an East Carolina podcast earlier this week, and those guys were awesome, actually, really cool. I know I had some frustration about this suggestion that the Big 12 and the ACC should, or the AAC should link up and all this. Some of that is ego, and those guys were super nice and laid out I thought a fairly compelling case. But one thing I remember them mentioning is I think they said it was $9 million was the payout per year in the AAC. And I think your hope would be like Big 12 TV payout, even without Texas and Oklahoma, like you'd hope maybe you can get like 12, 13, something like that. So from that standpoint, it did seem like it was closer than you'd want it to be. And also the athletic TV numbers have been the athletic, the entity put out the TV numbers about Big 12 viewership and AAC viewership, and the remaining 8 schools in the Big 12 compared to the AAC. Sobering. It was like a 90,000 person difference in terms of who's watching the two. So I think a lot of that is actually a lot closer than we would like to admit, which is just it sucks. That's an unfortunate reality, though, about where things are at. Again, Oklahoma State is the school that draws better out of that group. David Heimer, SEC and ESPN will dismantle college football. Fans will lose interest quickly. Yeah, look, I think it's a very real possibility. I don't know how quickly it'll happen. I don't know how long that takes. I don't know how many more chess moves will occur on the board before that really gets to that point. But I absolutely think it's real. I think that possibility is out there, and I think you're going to start seeing it. Maybe I am just. I know a lot of people pointed out to me hey, this happened to the Big East, and there are some schools like UConn that got really screwed in all of this the first time around. And maybe I am just too in my own Big 12 bubble, in my own Big 12 world. But to me, alienating the Big 12 is a bigger deal than what happened to the Big East, because I just think more passionate fan bases, wider reach, more college football history there. In terms of people who really legitimately care about the sport. So to me, this seems like it would be much more detrimental than what happened to the Big East back then. Melinda, K-State's an underdog school, and other underdog schools don't get it. Yeah, yes. I mean, look, there's no doubt K-State's absolutely in that category. I think it plays well for them a lot of times, kind of the chip on the shoulder thing. But right now it's not real fun to be the underdog. Average Joe. What up, Average Joe? Is that a dodgeball reference? The remaining teams should form their own conference, the Big 8 conference, maybe add a couple teams down the road. Yeah, it seems like right now that's the most likely option, because, again, I don't see who it is that's going to be leaving, who's going to have the life raft. It's been very interesting. One of the things I was going to talk about, I wasn't sure how many questions I would get, and I appreciate all the questions and input in the chat from you guys. One of the things I was going to talk about is the difference in reaction and how different schools kind of are treating everything right now and how they feel about it. Because the one school in the league right now, call me biased, I am closer to it than some. I did not grow up a fan of this institution of higher learning, but the one school in the league that right now seems convinced that they're going somewhere is Kansas. And I still don't see that happening, because the Big Ten clearly is not interested in having anything to do with the Big 12. They are thinking bigger picture here and trying to combat the SEC with some blockade of votes and perhaps a scheduling alliance with these other two schools. There's already been proof put out there by The Athletic that the economics of this don't really work for Kansas with what the value of Big 12 basketball would be. Now, CJ Moore, who is another writer for The Athletic, did come back with a story that said, well, maybe. It was basically well, maybe actually this could be different, that the numbers could be different than what we actually see out there publicly. But man, like what credible national writer have we seen report anything about Kansas in the Big Ten? It's just been all rumors. It's been a lot of rumor. And I think Kansas fans are just very convinced that because of that basketball brand, they're going to land somewhere. And I'm trying to choose my words very carefully here, but I don't even look, I think there's some earned arrogance at Kansas, but there's certainly a lot of arrogance. With basketball, it is earned arrogance, but there's a lot of arrogance about like too big to fail. I think the feeling there would be like the basketball program is too big to fail. My response to that would be, one, look at UConn. It was won a national championship more recently and what happened to them. And two, if I were a Kansas fan, I wouldn't be as concerned about that because I don't think their basketball program can survive anywhere. Now, yes, financially it would help out to still have the money that they would in a, like, I understand the difference here that I stress all the time. Like, hey, being in Power 5 versus non-Power 5, you're talking about $30-40 million potentially in difference. But still, I think the basketball program would be fine no matter where it is that they go. Football may be a different kind of idea. But that's the other part of this. 10 years ago, Kansas was just coming off of the Mark Mangino era. They had a very respectable football program at the time. Now they've gone through the worst 10-year stretch, basically this side of K-State in the 80s that we've ever seen in Power 5 football. So that's really dragging them down. John Coy. I'm going through the regular list of comments here that everybody's left. Oh, man. Oh, boy. Well, I was, John, and I just lost my place, and there are so many comments here, man. Holy cow. I'm just seeing all these comments and trying to scroll back up, John. I believe your question, John, was what are my thoughts on K-State this year? Or where K-State ends up, I'm sorry. Where do I think K-State is ending up? Tough part here, man, is right now with this alliance that's formed, making it seem like nothing's happening with the Pac-12 anyway, it's hard for me to say it's anything but just sticking around with the remaining 8 teams. Again, gun to my head scenario, I would say K-State winds up in a league with the 7 other remaining Big 12 teams and another 4 teams from the AAC. That to me seems like the most likely scenario. The Big Ten, I think would always thumb their nose at K-State. K-State's not an AAU school like Kansas or Iowa State. I think that is sort of a non-starter, especially when the Big Ten can be very picky right now. I think even though K-State's been the 3rd winningest football program over the last decade in the Big 12, it's just not a noticeable, exciting, flashy brand that anybody has been able to that's a problem going back to that goes back to Bill Snyder. Like even when he was great in K-State, a lot of people wouldn't realize this. They won 11 games in a 7-year span. K-State won 11 games 6 times from the late 90s to the early 2000s. And even then, I think there could have been a lot more done as far as branding that would help out today. But K-State unfortunately never did that. So I just don't think there's a lot of options. I think the only other chance you'd have besides being in that 8-team league would be jumping off to the Pac-12 somehow if they wanted to take 4 teams. Just heard a little tiny bit of chatter at the beginning of realignment about, hey, is K-State trying to work together with Oklahoma State and Texas Tech? But there's not been a ton of that since. It's the unfortunate part. So look, man, there are a ton of comments here. I did not even realize this because mine was kind of stuck up at the beginning here. I love you guys. This has been great. Thank you to everybody who is putting comments here. I'm gonna say I'll do like 10 to 15 more minutes here. Because of the wide range of comments right now, I will just remind you that guys like Wade, who again, it says like message deleted. I am sorry about that, Wade. I hope that didn't mess anything up there. I appreciate you guys. You can pay to get your comment highlighted and seen by me as I try and make my way through a very overwhelming list of these questions right now. It's just a little money sign that's under the chat box. I'm not going to badger you guys to do that. I'm just letting you know that it is out there if you want to. I'm not trying to milk you guys of money or anything. I really appreciate everybody who has. But if you want to make sure that your comment gets in here or your question in the next 10 to 15 minutes, that is one way to do so. So, all right, let me try and catch back up here. Okay, Brandon Russell TV. Hey, John, what is the deal with Taylor Warner, former 4-star number 9 offensive guard in the nation for K-State? Okay, yeah. So K-State specific question there. I think there are some unfortunate medical issues going on that have been recurring for him. I don't think the outlook right now looks great. And I can't be too specific here. I hope you understand. But I would say that think about in the last 10 to 15 years, some of the issues that have come to light with football and the dangers of playing football. That's the breadcrumb I'll leave for you there, and just try to do some of the math there on what's going on with him. Sucks though, because I was hearing great things about him. Practice, they loved him, and I think he was going to be a stud. The good news is offensive line, they're pretty stacked with depth there right now. It's about the deepest area on the team. So, okay. Appreciate that, Brandon. Red Wine 65. Okay, he's responding to somebody. Steve Armbruster, up to 68 teams. If Pac-20 and other 3 super conferences at 16 teams each, they can have the first 4 in hoops, and every team makes it to the big dance every year. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice thought. Problem is, I just don't know how much like basketball drives any of this, or how much people really care. And honestly, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens with this channel during basketball season. I'm certainly going to continue to talk a bunch of football and hopefully recruiting. But like, man, as somebody who grew up just loving Big 12 basketball, like, shout out to anybody who remembers all the old school Whataburger commercials and like the Phillips 66 commercials with the guy at the free throw line, like dribbling a tire. Like I grew up with all that, and I love Big 12 basketball, but man, it's hard to get into these days. Like it's hard to get into Big 12 hoops, or just college basketball in general. I do still watch the Big 12, but it's just hard to get real geeked up about it until it does get to the NCAA tournament. Dylan Krause, why didn't Texas just go independent? I think look, Texas, we all know, like they have the money and resources. They would be fine going independent, but I do think there is value to the SEC and the brand. I think a lot of this is like driven by, I mean, it's stability for sure, but also Texas seemed to be really perturbed by A&M being in the SEC and picking up its recruiting, because A&M could go to kids in state and say, like, you want to come play in the SEC, you want to come play for the best conference around, you can do so and stay home in the state of Texas. And I think that's really bothered Texas. Texas's recruiting has fallen like a half step. I mean, they still recruit very well, but instead of consistent top 5 to 10 classes, now it's like top 10 to 15 classes typically from Texas. So they've fallen off a tick. Texas A&M's come up a tick. I think that SEC patch that goes on the jersey really did mean something to them. And like, it's hard to deny. I mean, as infuriating as it is, and as much as I hate the SEC, and like it made me want to throw up listening to Feinbaum today, like, they are the brand, they are the entity, they are the thing in college football. They put guys into the NFL at a rate that nobody else does. They recruit better than anybody else. They're the big boys. And so I think even Texas can humble itself enough to realize that there's a lot of value in that. So that would be my main answer there. Now, John V, Notre Dame negotiating right now. Notre Dame will be very interesting to monitor throughout this. If the playoff does expand to 12 and sticks the same way that it was, like, Notre Dame's going to have no problem getting into the playoff. I guess there is the issue of like first round bye, because that was supposed to only go to the conference champs, right? But I just doubt that you wind up seeing Notre Dame ever actually join a conference. Speaking of independence, they flirted as much as you possibly could with the ACC, and then still have just said like, nah. So I don't see Notre Dame ever joining a league. Let's see. Jeff Edwards, you never wait. Why even be an entity if you have no other goal? What was the Big 12's goal? Yeah, the only point, I'm not sure specifically, Jeff, what that was referencing, but I assume it's like waiting on adding teams. Right now, again, the case I will make is like, I'd be curious to see if 41 egos in the same room, which is the 3 conference alliance, if something falls apart there, and see if you can get back in with the Pac-12 and wait a little bit longer on that. And then if it's referencing 2016, this is one thing I saw from some Oklahoma circles right after Texas and Oklahoma left, was like, oh, well, Oklahoma was pro-expansion. Boren was pro-expansion. if the Big 12 would have just expanded, then this would all be different. I don't think so. Like, if you're telling me that Cincinnati and UCF were in the league now, Oklahoma and Texas would still be here, I'm just not buying that. So I don't think there was as much value in that as people make it out to be. I think a lot of this has just been a problem from the start, the way the power dynamics were tilted in the conference. Texas always had so much power, and everybody had to do so much to bow to them, that something like this was just bound to happen. You were just bound to get there. Craig Hansen, is ISU legit? I like this. Some actual football talk. I know, look, the realignment stuff is fascinating, as depressing as it can be at sometimes, and it's definitely the thing that's driving engagement right now. But I'm totally here to talk some football too. Is Iowa State legit? Yes, Iowa State is legit. Is Iowa State a college football playoff contender? I would say no. This is where I'm going to differ from what the popular opinion is right now on the Cyclones. And I'm okay if you call me a little biased, a little jaded. There is I don't know if everybody in the Big 12 would be like super familiar with this, but K-State, Iowa State has turned into, especially among the Twitter followings of both fan bases, which I'm heavily involved with because I'm on Twitter way too much. It's turned into a rivalry between K-State and Iowa State, because I think for a long time, like, Iowa State looked at K-State as like, why can't we be that? Similar school, why can't our football program be that? And now Iowa State obviously has ascended quite a bit with Matt Campbell, and there have been some great games played between the two teams, last year notwithstanding, over the last 10 years. And so it's turned into quite a rivalry. And so, yes, I pick on Iowa State a lot. So if you want to say, hey, you're biased, I don't really have a great defense for that because of what my public actions would say. But I am telling you, you can believe it or not, I'm being truthful here in my analysis of Iowa State. I think they're a very good team. I think they lack enough truly upper echelon talent to like legitimately feel like they could beat Oklahoma twice, this Oklahoma team twice, and take care of their business the rest of the way and get into the playoff, right? Because the thing we know about Iowa State is, even when they've had these good teams, like, they're always stumbling out of the gates. And so that's what I look to. I mean, they have to play Iowa. They have to play Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa's been tricky for them. Iowa's beaten them. Shoot, Matt Campbell has not beaten Iowa, right? It's like 5 or 6 in a row. So I just need them to prove that to me first. And I also, the thing, Breece Hall is incredible. And one of my biggest regrets as a K-State fan, that he got out of Wichita and in-state left to go to Iowa State. I think Brock Purdy is a hair overrated. Touch reckless for my blood, and I think he needs to reel some of that in. And I mean, frankly, like, I was a little disappointed in him last year. I thought he got too much love on the end of season All Big 12 list. I need to see it truly from them, and I don't think they're at that level. I think Iowa State is like a 15-ish level team, like in the teens. 11 to 19, somewhere there is where I think Iowa State belongs. I don't think they're a legitimate playoff threat. No offense to the Clones. Look, clearly, you guys drilled us last year. You're a great team. I like Breece Hall a lot. I talked to him at Big 12 Media Days and really enjoyed him. A lot of things to like there. Matt Campbell's great. Like, as much as I try and hate on him, he's amazing. I loved his answer this past week, actually, when he was asked, like, how you recruit when you don't know if you're going to be Power 5. It was great. Anyway, long story short, I think they're good, not great. Cyclone Steve. Man, like, I thank you, first of all, Cyclone Steve, for contributing to the cause here. And second of all, I can definitely appreciate your take and your humility here in saying ISU has to beat OU twice to be in the playoff, and Rattler is too good to beat twice. That's basically what I'm saying. You know, that Oklahoma team is going to be really good. They're getting first place votes for a reason. Phil Steele picked them to win the national championship for a reason. They're a very, very good team. Now that they got some things figured out, you know, there was obviously a bumpy road at the beginning of the year last year when they lost to K-State and Iowa State to get Rattler acclimated. And Rattler was not good. I mean, he melted down in the fourth quarter against K-State. He was not very good. But clearly he's got it rolling now. Lincoln Riley's track record, their defense is getting better. I have a hard time seeing that. And it's really like, Steve, I can see Iowa State certainly beating Oklahoma once. And like last year, it is fair to say like they were very close to beating Oklahoma twice last year. But the part of it is, again, can you take care of business the rest of the way? Because it's not, you can put all this focus on beating Oklahoma, but can you also take care of your business the rest of the way? And there's not been enough consistency for me from Matt Campbell in doing that yet to fully buy in on it. But I understand the excitement for Iowa State. I understand why they get a lot of love. They have a popular coach. And it's like a trendy thing. You know, I mean, people that follow college football, especially right now, like everybody's so sick of, you know, you can just pencil in or pen in really the top 4 every single year. It's going to be Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, and then like rotate in Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, and like that's going to be it every single year. So people get sick of that and they see a team like, oh, Iowa State, like people think they're really good and they're very close. That's going to become like a trendy pick to be like, hey, look out for that because people want to talk about somebody else. So I think Iowa State even gets some extra benefit and some boost from that. I understand why all the love is there. I think it's gone a tad bit too far. But hey, if Iowa State proves me wrong, I'll certainly have a lot of egg on my face. And either way, I'm going to have some fun with it on Twitter. So Steve, if you follow me on Twitter, please don't be offended by it. It's nothing personal. I'm just deeply indebted in the Farmageddon rivalry right now as far as it goes on Twitter. Okay, I'm going to do like 5 more minutes here. There are so many questions I'm not getting to in the chat, and I apologize for that. Like I'm trying. If you want to squeeze it in here, you can do what Cyclone Steve did just there and donate a little bit. It's the money sign under the little chat box. If you do want to make sure your comment gets in, but I'm going to just scroll through here real quick and try and read a couple more. And this is something like the response to this has been amazing. So I'm definitely going to try and do this more often, do some live chats, certainly like once a week during football season, but maybe we can even do twice. Maybe we can do like a Saturday night recap, depending on where I'm at traveling, because I'll be following around K-State this year. And then something midweek to kind of recap everything. I think that'd be a lot of fun. This has been far greater than I imagined it was going to be. So I appreciate you guys a ton. Let's see. Return trip. ESPN and the SEC totally didn't reach out to OU in Texas. Never happened. Wink, wink. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like that's this video that I'm trying to piece together, all the timeline of what happened with Texas and Oklahoma and where we can see ESPN's influence coming in. And like a lot of this stuff is like, it's so very clear. There was the article written by Don Williams in the Lubbock Avalanche Journal back in May about Fox and ESPN not wanting to re-up the television deal, not wanting to renegotiate early with the Big 12 on that deal. And then Oklahoma turns around and the university president cites that as one of the main reasons that they left. Like, hey, we weren't going to get a renegotiated deal from ESPN and Fox. Well, we now know that these talks have been going on for, if you ask Max Olson, could be as long as a year in advance between Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC. And you're to tell me that in all of that, ESPN never had any involvement? Get out of here. You're high, if that's what you think. They absolutely did. And so what that means is ESPN knows Texas and Oklahoma are negotiating their way into the SEC months before that happens in May. So then when the Big 12 comes to the table to say, hey, can we renegotiate this? By the way, with a committee that the Big 12 formed to do this that had the Texas University president on it, and they hired a consulting firm spending money on that while the Texas University president is on this committee, knowing full well that Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC with help from ESPN. And then ESPN turns around and says, nah, we're not going to renegotiate it. And then you can use that as your reasoning for not sticking with the Big 12. That's some shady stuff, man. That's some shady stuff. So, like, yeah, as Big 12 fans, we have every reason to be upset about that. Oh, I like this. Tony Barber. ESPN is the barking cartel of college football, but if the rest of the teams do nothing, there will be no game worth watching. Time to make moves. Banking cartel. Banking cartel. I saw barking in it, so I was thinking like carnival barker, and I was like, oh boy, well that's exciting. I like that. But yeah. I mean, I think you're right, Tony. Like ESPN is really taking this over again. You already have an admission on record from, basically an admission on record from John Skipper, who used to be the president of ESPN, that they really are the root cause of all of this. Greg, Red Raider fans love your videos. Thank you, Greg Mullinax, for that. Shout out to Texas Tech, all my homies in Lubbock. Larry Hillman, Baylor and TCU won't be accepted by the Pac-12 due to being religious schools, so Tech and Oklahoma State would be probable targets. Yeah, that was definitely something I heard a lot of early on, that like for Baylor and TCU, that would be an issue. I think TCU is an interesting case, and there was a great chat that I had with Drew Davison, who covers TCU for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. It's on the channel. You can go find that video right now within the last week. But he was basically making the case and saying, like, TCU kind of fancies itself culturally to be sort of like a West Coast kind of a school. On top of that, they've tried to distance themselves from the religious affiliation. They don't, if you look in their media guide, it'll tell you, like, call us TCU, don't call us Texas Christian. They've tried to push away from some of that. And Baylor, I think, while Baylor may not have the issues that they would have 5-10 years ago with some of that, there's still a lot of lingering stuff there. And they've also had all this, the Bryles thing and the NCAA ruling that just came down here recently. They have a lot of baggage. And I'm not saying that disrespectfully, but I think even Baylor fans could admit, like, there's some baggage there, and perception is going to be a problem with the Pac-12. But in the end, money talks, and desperate times, desperate measures. If it's going to be Pac-12 survival hinges on it, like that's probably something that would happen. All right, here's the last thing. John Kelly says AD Lions is playing it cool at WVU right now. Saw him talk today. I saw that too, because the dude of West Virginia, shout out to him on Twitter. He gives me a lot of information from the West Virginia side of things. And he's definitely somebody that I remember from the first round of realignment and followed. But he sent me a link to that today. So I watched part one of the conversation that Tony Caridi had with Shane Lyons, who's the athletic director at West Virginia. Very much played it cool. He gave basically the same message that Gene Taylor, who's the AD at K-State, has been giving, which is that it's going to take a while. Like, nothing is going to happen very soon, and there's going to be a lot of patience required. And he was saying, look, West Virginia, we've been resilient before. We've been here. The fall of the Big East, obviously, those are pretty disconcerting times, I can imagine, in Morgantown. So basically his message was like, we've been through it. We can do this. We'll be all right. And that's exactly what you should be doing, I think, if you're the AD at West Virginia. But also shout out to Tony Caridi. Very nice guy. One of my favorite. Look, the Big 12 is spoiled with play-by-play talent and just quality human beings. But one of my favorites in the conference to listen to, and is just a guy that's helped me out before. So I really appreciate Tony Caridi and West Virginia. I'm trying to think, who did I not shout out in the Big 12? All right, we got Iowa State taken care of for sure. Explain my position there. Texas Tech, a lot of love there. Baylor, hey, look, I know I just said the Pac-12 thing. I'm outlining a reality there, I think, but I feel like there's a lot of hatred for Baylor across the conference, and there have been a lot of bad things certainly that have gone on there, but I also know a lot of really great people. Lark Smith, who has been involved with us in the past, covers Baylor. David Smoke and the guys at Sikkim 365 Radio have been really good to me. I like them a lot too. I ate at a pretty good, it was like seafood place in Waco. It was right across from the stadium, the new stadium, the last time I was there, and it was pretty good. Actually, one of the things I remember from that, maybe it was 2 times ago, because I remember watching Kansas beat Texas there after a K-State Baylor game. So yeah, we got Baylor, Oklahoma State. Man, Robert Allen has been great to the show. He's awesome. Dave Hunziker, super nice guy, who's their play-by-play voice. Adam Hildebrandt, who's helped out on the Oklahoma State Radio Network, another great guy. Like, love them. I've had a great time in Stillwater. There was this place called Brooklands where we used to do our pregame show in Stillwater. I don't think it exists anymore, but that was one of my favorite places that we would go. And Stillwater just feels very similar to Manhattan, so I can certainly respect that. West Virginia, I already said. My trip to Morgantown is my favorite in the league because it's so unique. Texas, Texas. I don't know that I really need to say much to you. Austin is fun. We've done our pregame show live on 6th Street. That's been very fun, but you don't need your ego stroked at all. Kansas, look, Kansas fans know how I feel. We got a complex relationship there. Although even then, I will say, my sister went to Kansas. I actually really like the city of Lawrence. I do. I enjoy the food scene. I enjoy the music scene. Growing up in Kansas City, I was close enough to it. Like, I would go to a handful of concerts at the Bottleneck or the Granada in Lawrence. So I will even say that for you, Kansas fans. Okay. God, am I missing anybody? Let me scroll down to the bottom of the comments and see if I'm missing anybody. If somebody is upset here that I'm not shouting them out. TCU, John Denton, great guy. He's their color commentator, who's helped us out on our pregame show for a long time. Really like that. Really like him. TCU's got a beautiful stadium. Amon G. Carter is a really, really nice stadium. And Fort Worth is very cool. I very much prefer Fort Worth to Dallas. Very much. Mark, all right. So Mark threw in $5 here right at the last minute. I appreciate it, Mark. Mark, boy, I'm gonna botch that last name, Mark. I am sorry. I'm not gonna try. Should the Big 12 and Alliance fans boycott the SEC? Well, I appreciate the question, and certainly I'm with you in sentiment, Mark. Like I would love to boycott the SEC. I don't know, I don't know how you legitimately do it. I don't know how you legitimately that's the problem. Like what can you do? Now the Alliance, if you're talking about the Alliance schools or the 3 conferences, like those 41 schools, they may have some actual power to try and do something, but I don't know what it is that Big 12 schools can really do other than I don't know, come on a YouTube live show and talk crap on the Feinbaum show. So that's really about all I can say there. What else can we do to boycott the SEC? I'm trying to think for you here, Mark. We can. I'm going to have to think on that. Mark, I will think on that and remind me about it the next chat. I'll try and have a better answer for you. I'm seeing some of the comments now. Okay, this is fun, watching these actually live now. I should be doing this more often. But Jack, don't be a hater, John. #SEC. Jack, look, Jack, if you're an SEC fan and you're still around here, I appreciate that a lot. Because this has not been a kind chat to the SEC. And all I would say, Jack, is just be cognizant of the fact that if you were in our position, you would feel the same way about the SEC that we do feel about the SEC. And I've said the same thing to Texas fans and Oklahoma fans. Just understand if the roles were reversed, you would feel the exact same way. It's just all about where we're at here in the hierarchy of things. And that's the unfortunate reality. Darvin, sounds like you're all about building your brand, less about real conversation. I don't know, man. I've tried to have a real conversation here too. I try and be very straight up and honest with everybody, and that's kind of been my philosophy from the beginning. I don't try and be something I'm not or hide a lot of things. So look, is there an aspect of am I trying to build a brand by having a YouTube channel and having a Twitter account and a daily radio show and being basically a content creator? Absolutely. Yes. 100%. That's a part of it. That's what you do. You are selling yourself every single day. Every single day I get behind a microphone on the radio or YouTube, whatever it's going to be. I'm trying to sell myself, and I am a brand. So 100%. You're correct. I won't run and hide from that at all. But that doesn't mean that I'm not here for real conversation or to listen to what people have to say or take in other perspectives or provide something valuable. I think that's the trade-off, right? So, yeah, look, I'm anybody that's going to comment or criticize or whatever, I'm here for constructive criticism. I'll listen to your opinion. And like I said, sometimes in the moment I get snarky, and I apologize for that. That's just kind of ingrained in me. And sometimes I can't help that, but I definitely I do value feedback, and I'm always going to try and be really honest with you about anything it is that I say. So, main fan bases, Brandon. Main fan bases I feel bad for K-State, TCU, and Baylor fans because it's hard seeing those teams join other power conferences. Yeah. And it does feel like K-State, TCU, and Baylor are the least talked about when it comes to other conferences right now. So, yeah, it's a tough boat that we're all in. All right. I keep saying that, man, I keep saying that I'm going to bail here on this. I need to go turn down I'm in a new apartment. It's kind of hot right now. I need to turn down the air. I apologize if you guys can see me sweating here. Doug, tech fan here. John, how can we listen to your radio program on the internet? Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. The podcast is The Game KMAN. If you just search The Game KMAN on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever it is that you get your podcasts, you will be able to find it there. Now, I will give you a heads up that like that's a radio show that's here in Manhattan, Kansas. So it's going to be 70% K-State, but we also do talk Big 12. We'll talk whatever it is sports fans are talking about that day, and we'll try and just have some fun. So I would encourage you to check it out. And if you're a K-State fan, obviously it's going to really cater to you. And I also have another specific podcast called Lock It Up with Kurtz, which is with Aaron Lockett, who's Tyler Lockett's uncle, who played at K-State. And you can also find that content there. But the other thing I would say, if you are looking for the radio show, it's the videos lately. If you go to the description of the videos that have been posted on the YouTube channel, I've been putting links to the radio show in there. So you can go find it directly. You can either search it out on the podcast channels, or you can actually just go click the link that's in the description on the YouTube videos. So with that, follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz too. You can certainly do that. And there are links everywhere on my page to different places for content. So this has been awesome. Really appreciate you guys that stuck around for this, hung around for this. I appreciate every single one of you that's subscribed. I know I say that all the time, and I'm sounding like a broken record, and I'm tired because I've been talking for an hour and a half at this point. But love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. We'll try and do this at least once a week, hopefully more than that once football season gets rolling. And we will talk to you soon. We'll see you later.